I don't usually repeat sermons, but I did it in Meridian, and it was online, and she was watching back of the old stuff, and she loved it. So.
Hello.
What's that?
Got a project for our class.
Okay.
Southern Living. I'd like to do Easter baskets.
Okay.
Everybody here start bringing stuff. Sure. Any stress to give to me.
Okay. How many baskets we got?
There's 25, or we can do one big one. She originally, when I was talking to her about change, did I say we changed to the girls?
Yeah.
We were talking about changing, we're going to help.
Yeah.
And she was originally talking about this doing one big one. I know we can do 25 spots, I'll get the elders to help us for about 25 baskets.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Fill it up.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
We've got some things here that we can give some cups and stuff. But if we all bring a little treat.
We got until Easter's not till April. Easter's 13th, so we need to maybe have it all to us by the 2nd. Second of the night, whichever. April, we start raining stuff.
We could probably take it to the week before.
Yeah.
Maybe.
What I'll do, I'll probably take it this week sometime. We have time to do it. Ray doesn't eat candy. Let's take the candy.
Yeah. Diabetic candy.
Right. Working to church. Tom and Jerry are, listen, you have to bring me to church. We're not taking this one.
Okay.
We got the All-Star games.
I got you.
In Montgomery, so that's gonna be a late night.
Right.
I watched you the other day, and I'm wondering if you did it like that.
Hello.
Where I was.
All right, y'all ready to roll? Just want to go through some prayer requests first. I got a text from Ruth Ann. She says, make sure you know that 3 scan results, he'll get them at noon today. So they were going to come to class, but Dalian had an orthodontist appointment that ran over. So he'll find out at noon today, 3 Blake. And that's his test results from his scans and everything. And then also, David Till, Missy's dad, fell on Monday. I think it was Monday. We had the ambulance took him to the hospital. He had a gash on his head, and they scanned his head and everything, so there was no concussion or anything like that. But as soon as he got home, he can't really move his let's see which one is it, left knee. And so yesterday we went and helped move him, I think it was yesterday. And then last night she called about 9 o'clock, and they had been trying for about an hour and a half to just move him from the chair to the bed. And so we ended up going and we got him changed, cleaned up and everything, and then convinced him to sleep in the chair for the night. So he didn't have to go to the bed and get in and get out. So they're going to try to get him to the doctor today and see if there's anything wrong with that knee. I think he could have hyperextended it, but it's swollen pretty bad. And what's that?
Any broken bones?
No, they didn't say he had any broken bones, but they didn't scan the leg. They didn't scan the hip. Usually somebody falls, it's one of the first things they do, but they didn't scan his hip or his knee. And once we got him up into the Jeep, for whatever reason, I didn't even think about having to get him in there when we went to the house. But after the ambulance took him on the way home, I tried to get him up in my Jeep, and he couldn't get up. We had to pick him up and get him in, and then pick him up and get him out. So he's really sore. So they'll find out more today. And then also, do you know Sue Carroll? She used to teach at the Christian school up at Snook. Her husband, Phil, passed away yesterday.
Oh.
And I don't have any details on that, but remember him. And also Morris Allen, that's Micah's dad, passed away yesterday. And a little before, it was morning time. But anyways, his funeral service right now, tentatively, all we know is it's going to be probably Friday morning. So Thursday, Friday morning, they got the visitation and then the service. So it'll be at Shiloh Church Christ, which is just outside of Florence. And that'll be this week. So remember his family. He was able to get up there and be with his mom before he passed away. But just keep praying for that family.
Yeah, he said he passed away very
Peacefully.
peacefully, and it was a good thing.
He had a rough couple weeks, and just pray for them. Who else we need to remember? My brain's fried this morning.
Mike Reedy.
Yeah, Mike Reedy. Keep praying for him.
Who is Gay Black?
She's a member here. I don't know that I've ever met her. If I have,
Her and her husband attended here years and years ago. I think she's been in this situation for about 6, 7 years, something like
Okay.
that. Her daughter's been here, moved from California,
okay.
and she'll be lucky if she gets through the weekend.
Okay.
Her daughters are all coming in town.
Okay. Hazel?
And at one time, Robert someone was the guy in charge of all of our sound equipment upstairs.
Oh, really? Okay.
Over here.
Yeah. And trying to remember who else. Let's see. My mind's lost today. Let's see. Rosa, when is your
March 24th.
March 24th? Man, keep pushing it out. Huh?
Has anybody heard anything on Andy Gordon?
All I know, Risha, I had texted her and she said thank you for the prayers, but I didn't get an update. So.
She said the other day, Monday I guess it was, that they weren't real sure his knees are okay now.
Okay.
They weren't real sure exactly what it was, what's going on with him. But, she's back in town because she went to South Carolina to see her grandbaby.
Okay.
But he seems to be doing okay at this point.
Okay.
But obviously keep them in your prayers because,
Yeah, definitely.
Barry.
Barry's doing well. He actually has been moving around a little bit, so I don't know if he'll be here tonight, but right now he's doing pretty good. Slow go. Anybody else?
Tim's had a rough few weeks.
Really?
That, been in the bed most of the time. And they did another epidural, which did nothing, and so they just kind of stopped. And then the dementia just seems to be progressing. So
Yeah.
stays in bed most of the time.
Be praying for him and for you too. Definitely. So it seems like somebody else had surgery. Who was it? Goodness. It's been 2 weeks, so I've been here on 2 Wednesdays in a row. Well, let's remember these and make sure you keep up with everything that's going on online and on the bulletin. Be in prayer for these that have lost loved ones. I know we've got a few more, like Philip. He's on hospice, and who else?
Glenda.
That's right. Yeah, Glenda. She had surgery. That's who it was. She's doing okay. She's struggling, but she's doing okay.
She's doing a lot of therapy and stuff right there in the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
All right. James, would you mind leading us in prayer?
Heavenly Father, we praise you, Father, for the awesome God that you are. Father, we're so thankful that we have this opportunity this morning to come together and to open your divine word, to read and study from it so that we might have a better understanding of the things that you would have us to do, the way that you would have us to live. Father, we ask that you lift us up in righteous things and defeat us in ungodly things. Father, there's so many that have been mentioned this morning that are sick, some with cancer, some with all different types of ailments. And some have lost loved ones. And Father, we know that your healing hand is much better than any of the doctors or anything that the medical people can do. And we ask you to put your healing hand upon these that are sick. Those that are bereaved, may they find peace. Father, we ask that you go with us now through this study and be with Ray as he teaches us. And may he present your word in a way that will be easy for us to understand. We pray, Father, that our hearts will be tender, that they will accept the truth and practice the truth. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. So let's go to Hebrews 13. Hebrews 13. Before we start, I wanted to just mention real quick that hopefully we'll get done with the whole chapter today. And so that means that we'll be starting something new next week. We had talked about 2 topics, and I think both of them are fantastic. I just want to get your feedback on which one we should do first, and then we'll talk about for the rest of the year. But we talked about doing a study on world religions, on what do we know about Islam and what do we know about Hinduism. And, you know, we've got a vice president now who his wife was raised Hindu. We've had people in positions of power that were raised. I think it was Nikki Haley was raised as a Sikh, Sikhism. There's a lot of people in positions of authority that are Jewish. What do they believe today now that they can't follow the sacrifice patterns of Leviticus? Lots of New Ageism, things like that. So we could cover the world religions first. But then I want to take a break so we can cover a book or something, because it's more of a historical study, and there's not really book, chapter, and verse except for what we're going to see that combats those particular viewpoints. And then we wanted to do a series on denominations and what different denominations teach, what we can do to study with folks, different points of reference. We'll do it in a very loving way, but we'll talk about how to teach the truth and love to people that believe certain things. We'll talk about the church and what happened, how things went off track by the 300s. Really, the church, the Roman Church, Roman Catholic Church, as they began to be known, basically was the power of the Roman government. So we'll see how the government faded into religion and vice versa, and why it still stands. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Restoration Movement, how we get back to the Bible. And so there's probably, it depends on how many we want to cover. Some of them you may not be necessarily interested in, but I'll give you a whole list of different religious groups, and we'll talk about which ones we want to study. And I'll have a notebook together too, so we can study those that we don't get a chance to do in class. So which one of those would you like to do first? Would you like to tackle the world religions, or would you like to do the different denominations?
World religions.
World religions? Anybody else want to do world religions? We'll take a little while on Islam, because I know that that's a concern. What does this mean when they talk about Sunnis and Shias and all of that? It'll also help us understand the conflict going on in Gaza a little bit, why there are so many different groups that support financially those that are anti-Jewish, and we'll talk about that too. So hopefully that'll be good. Now I know it'll be a lot of history and there'll be a lot of pictures and things. So if you end up being bored with that, I apologize, but it'll just be a few weeks. I say a few, maybe 12, and then we'll move to a topical study and take a break, and then we'll come back to the denominations if that sounds good. So I'm also going to show you next week that all religions, almost all major religions, have the same tenets. There are basically 7 things that all religions have, and we'll see where that came from. My particular theory is it came from the garden. Hinduism is besides actually Hinduism predates Judaism. So does probably Zoroastrianism. So there are a few religions that predate Moses. And why is that? So we'll talk about that next week. Hopefully that'll be a blessing to you. So if hopefully you'll be here. Hopefully you won't get bored. Like I said, if you do, it'll be just for a few weeks. But I'll try to make it as interesting as I can. I love it. So let's go to Hebrews 13, and I want to try to finish up this book today. And appreciate Eric filling in for me the last couple weeks. There's a lot of good stuff in chapter 12, and I highlighted at the end of 11. At the end of that Hall of Fame of Faith, the very next words is, now we're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses. And that's all that 12 really talks about, is that those that have gone on before us now, that they're in this heavenly body. And he even talks about the church of the firstborn. He talks about how Moses went and touched the mountain, and we can't touch the mountain anymore. There's no physical mountain, but we're in Mount Zion. We're a part of the New Testament church, so we're all part of the same body, and so there's this glorious assembly that's waiting for us in heaven. And so 12 really does a good job of laying that out, and now as the Hebrew writer starts to conclude, he's talking about some moral decisions that have to be made to ensure that we get to that heavenly place. I love also where he says in chapter 12, we shouldn't be shaken, and I love that. The church ought to be strong. So let's look at the first 3 verses. It says, let brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels. Remember that prisoners, as if chained with them, those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are in the body also. So this is another place where another writer is commanding brotherly love. I think that ought to be understood, right? Like we ought to know that if we have brothers and sisters in Christ, we ought to love them. So the first question I want to ask is, why is there so many commands to love one another when that should be a natural thing for a Christian to do?
Because it's not a natural thing for a human to do.
Okay?
It has to be cultivated.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Things that I've been thinking about is, if you are in prayer, you got your lists.
Right.
And you're praying for these people, and you're supposed to pray for your enemies and all stuff.
Yeah.
And if you do so, it changes the way you think about these people.
Right.
It changes your perspective.
Right.
And you may see something that you say that's wrong, but
Right.
you really don't know.
Right.
You have to cultivate the compassion, and try your best not to think bad things.
Right.
So it's a constant work.
I said to somebody just last week, they were talking about somebody who was running their mouth about something and said, how do you feel about that? Like, how would you handle something like that? And I said, well, the Bible tells us to love our enemies, and I don't have anybody that I hate. I don't have anybody I hate. I've offered forgiveness as many as I can. But that being said, if the Lord happened to take some, I wouldn't be sad. You know what I'm saying? There are some people that, if their time comes, I'm not going to celebrate their death, but I'm going to say, okay. I'm not going to mourn, I'm not going to celebrate, but there are some people that are just so evil or have done so much wrong in the world that you almost want to celebrate. But the Bible does say to love our enemies, because they should be given an opportunity to obey the gospel, and they should be given a chance to turn their life around. And I know that y'all know my feelings on this because I've preached Ecclesiastes so many times, but Ecclesiastes is very clear. It says we were created good, and we found all kinds of ways to be evil. So at birth, we were all little babies. I don't know, you may here watch Marvel movies. You watch all of those? I know Rosa does, Eric does, Steve. Okay, so there's a scene in, it's in Endgame, I think, when they're trying to discuss how to get this glove off of Thanos and gets the rings. And I know this is something you're probably not interested in. But anyways, there's a scene where Rhodey, who is Iron Man's best friend, and he's doing a real good job filling those roles. But anyways, he says, instead of trying to gather all these stones, why don't we go back in time and find Thanos, the bad guy, and as a baby, and just and they're like, oh no, we can't do that, But there comes a point where you think, if somebody's so evil, if I could just go back in time and change that, like if you were issued a time machine and they said you can go back and change any point in history, and you could spare the world of a Hitler or a Stalin or of a Mao or someone who has created great, terrible acts against humanity, would you not want to go back and stop that? Well, you wouldn't stop it when they're an adult. You'd stop it when they were younger. And so that was the point that they were trying to make, is at some point this becomes a moral dilemma. And we have to eventually get to a point that we look at people not for what they've done physically, but for the value of their soul, that every soul is special and every person should get a better chance. I doubt there was a single Christian in the first century praying for the conversion of Saul of Tarsus. There may have been. But I doubt it, because even when God sends a vision to Ananias, he's like, Lord, you know who this guy is? Of course I do, Ananias. Well, I've heard that he's come here with some paperwork. He's going to arrest all of us and kill us. Are you sure that you? And God's like, absolutely. And so he has that moment where he's fearful for his life, and he doesn't want to go to Saul. But that conversion changed the history of the New Testament church in such that he wrote most of the books in our New Testament, and he helped convert hundreds of people and really encouraged preachers where nobody had done that before. So a lot of good stuff came from that conversion. So we're supposed to have love for all men, but I want you to notice the second word in the New King James Version. What kind of love? Brotherly love. So this is about the church, right? So nothing happens by accident. No verse in the Bible is there just by happenstance. There is meat in every word, in every verse. Let brotherly love, the church, New Testament church, brotherly love continue. Why? Verse 2. What does it say? Don't forget that we entertain angels or strangers unaware. Okay. Does that mean out in public, we're running into angels? Maybe. But his emphasis is to be loving towards people that are inside of the church. And then he says, don't forget, we entertain angels unaware. So it's possible that his emphasis is we're constantly surrounded by spiritual things. And there are things that we cannot see, we cannot know. And I've often said this before. I've said this to my wife before. I tell her she is an angel. To me, she's an angel. And so we use that term kind of flippantly sometimes, but nevertheless, the Hebrew writer says there are going to be angels around you all the time. And they may be disguised as a brother or sister in Christ. They may also be disguised as someone else. But he says just constantly let love reign. And that away, by showing kindness to someone, we're actually showing kindness to a servant of God. And now this, in a way, goes back to Matthew 25. Remember, Jesus is preaching there right before, he's in the last few days, maybe the last day of his preaching in the temple before he's arrested. And he talks about how on Judgment Day there are going to be some who say, Lord, didn't we do great things in your name? Did we do all this? And he says, depart, I never knew you. And one of the things that he emphasizes is he says, they say, we knew you, we preached, we did all this stuff. And he says, yeah, but you remember that time somebody was sick or somebody needed clothing, or you remember when that person was hungry or they were in prison? And he says, that was me. Okay, that you didn't do that to the least of these, you did it to me. And so everywhere we go, we should imagine that we are constantly in service to the Lord. And we don't know when we do good deeds who that might be. It might be an angelic spirit. It obviously, that a lot of the things that we do is it's meant to show, to inspire, to encourage people to see Jesus. And so in a way they see Jesus in us. And then he adds there, verse 3, also remember the prisoners that are chained, because he says it's like you are there with them. So I think the gist of these three verses is at some point the church has to focus on compassion, where we start thinking about how can we help other people, especially doing good to those in the household of faith, but outside of the church, what can we do to help, to encourage, to be more spiritual people? And this clearly to me is about hospitality and good works. That's what this is. Doing good to people, inviting people into your home, inviting people to your table to eat, and taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. That makes sense? So what are your thoughts on these three verses? Anything you want to add? Yeah, Kurt?
I got two quick ones. One is, the old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. The other one is that we're taught from childhood to avoid strangers, don't take candy from strangers. So then when we're adults, that doesn't really apply to us, but it's still there. So that's why we're commanded, to you know, love our brothers and,
Right.
and everybody. But you still have to be careful in this world.
Right.
But we're taught from children, though, certain things to protect them, and then we have to overcome that.
Right. Wise as serpents, harmless as doves. And it is very difficult in the world that we live in. It's not exactly like the culture of Bible times. If somebody knocked on your door in the middle of the night, they couldn't go to a hotel. They couldn't go to if they didn't have a tent and they're running late, or they had a mule that fell down in the desert and they knock on your door, there's no other place to show hospitality. But today we do have some other things. But I do think in the wisdom part of that, it would be good for us, even as a church family, to have a discussion on how we handle people that are homeless, people that are without food, because we are seeing more of that today. And I'm telling you, with the way that the economy has been for the last 2 years at least, we're in a hole right now. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the price of eggs, but we've lost more chickens in the last 2 months than they lost entire bird flu back a few years ago. So talking about millions and millions of eggs. So the economy's going very difficult. We've had members and friends and family who've had to move because rent and housing is so high here. I lived, I preached at Gulf Shores for 11 years, and in Albertville I was there 5 years, and we had a lot of homelessness in those communities. But I have never seen it like we've seen it this year. Never. I mean, like, we're talking about almost every day somebody's up here. They're up here with kids. They're up here with friends. They're sleeping out here next to the building. They're riding their bikes up and coming into the church building on Sundays and Wednesdays and trying to find food and trying to find shelter and trying to find. And it is our responsibility as a church to help as many people as possible. But at the same time, like Kurt said, we have to use a little bit of wisdom. And sometimes we need to remember the advice we gave to our kids about strangers. I tell my wife all the time, like, look, if I get in trouble with God at Judgment Day, I'll take my lumps. But I'm telling you not to pick up somebody on the side of the road. Don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. I'll answer to God if that's a wrong thing. But for the safety and security of my wife, and the fact that she can't physically fight someone that's going to try to overpower her, regardless of what happens. I said, don't ever pick up somebody. Now, I used to do that all the time. I didn't ever think twice about it. My grandpa used to hitchhike to work and school and everywhere else, and he told me, people did that in his day frequently, and so I did it. But a little wiser now. Yeah, Joe?
I don't want nobody to misunderstand what I'm fixing to say, because I think preaching the gospel is the main goal for us to save souls.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we put more emphasis on preaching the gospel outside of just this community here than we do trying to use some of those funds to help do some of the programs that you're talking about.
Right.
That's just my personal opinion,
Yeah, and
I think we should, and we do, but like I say, we've got 3 different things going on, here that I think some that those funds could be actually used
right.
in helping with the homeless and stuff like that,
Right.
because that's just my opinion. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't teach the gospel.
Yeah, and I
Summerdale can't do all of that,
Right, and there is a parable that applies in this way, and maybe you hadn't thought of it in this particular mindset, but this is something that I think about frequently, and that is in Luke 16, the rich man and Lazarus. Rich man's all up in his house. He determines what he wants to spend his money on, and there's a guy that dies on his doorstep with no food. And as much as we want to, help everybody all over the world, and that's important, I'm a big believer in missions. I'm a big believer in helping good works. Some of my best friends run universities and mission outlets. Chris Moran, who's been here several times, runs North Alabama Christian Children's Home, which I think is a fantastic work. But at some point, if we have people dying on our doorstep, I think we're going to be held accountable for that. The rich man was. And so for the people that are within our community and the members of our church that are struggling, if there are members of our congregation that need help, that's our primary responsibility, is to help them. And I think that the rich man, lack of a better term, he went to hell because he didn't help the people on the doorstep. So we want to try to figure out a way to help people in our community, and it's, the word's gotten out. That's why so many people are here. They're going back to their encampments and telling people, and these people, you'll watch them drive home. I've done it. I've driven home for lunch or went to a doctor's appointment and see somebody walking on the side of the road on the right hand side, and they could be cleared down by the old Hardee's. They could be, I don't know if you remember where the old Hardee's was, but they could be cleared down to Piggly Wiggly, and I can go home and eat lunch or do my doctor's appointment and come back, and they'll be almost here. They're walking here from Gulf Shores. They're walking to Summerdale Church of Christ from downtown Foley. They're walking here from Robertsdale. They've been told at the laundry place up in Robertsdale that Summerdale helps people. And so when you see people walking, anytime you see somebody walking, a pretty good chance they're walking to this building just on the hope that they could get some food. And and I understand a lot of that is because we've helped a lot of people, but and we want to help people. We do, but we need to have probably maybe speaking out of turn, but I think we probably need to have a team of people. Maybe I don't know if it needs to be a deacon or a committee of people that's their job, where they can help Wayne, because Wayne works at the rescue mission. He can't do it every day, and so when people come up here to get help, we've got bags. Chrissy's fixed these bags where we can just hand them a bag. But they're looking for a blessing box. They're looking for, and we had a lady here just 2 weeks ago, and she was loading herself full of groceries to be able to eat. She didn't have a refrigerator. She's homeless. What's she gonna do with that? She's gonna take it back to her tent where she's at, but she couldn't drive home on her bicycle, so we had to get her home with the bicycle and the food to get back to where she was. And those kinds of things are happening every day. Now some of it poses a security risk. That's a question we have to have. Some of it is a safety issue because we don't know what they're dealing with, what they're on. Some of them are clearly, we've had some people come up here that were on drugs, but we do have a responsibility from God to help those who cannot help themselves. But the help isn't always financial. The help isn't always food. I think personally, some of the best help we can give to them is getting them in some financial training, helping them find a place to stay. There are no homeless facilities in Baldwin County, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there'll ever be homeless facilities in Baldwin County because the commissioners don't want it. Our governor doesn't want it because most of the revenue for the state of Alabama comes from Baldwin County, and they don't want to have to pour money into these funds to help homeless people because everybody will move to the beach then. And we'll have people camping out all over the place, as we do now. There's some in trees. Once in a while, you'll look out and you'll see debris and trash in the trees line. Well, how'd that get there? Somebody's probably living out there. And imagine the fastest growing county in Alabama, the 8th or 9th fastest growing county in the United States of America, does not have any place for homelessness. So what do? We load them up, take an mobile. I've done that. We'll load them up, take Pensacola. I've done that too. I said, there's a homeless facility, get in the car, I'll drive you there. But the church needs to take the forefront. We've got Operation Spyglass, is that what they call it, Spyglass Initiative, where they're trying to help with food and funding and things, and that's an important part of our work. But again, we have to use some wisdom. Yeah, Barbara, you're gonna say something, I think.
I saw on Facebook the other day, and I wish I had written it down, where they talked strictly about Summerdale, and they quoted how many people were homeless, and they started this organization.
Yeah.
And they were asking for volunteers or anything like that. And I think, our life revolves around the church and all that, but there's a lot of people that do good.
Yeah.
And they start these programs, but that's their religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't necessarily believe that you have to attend church or anything like that, but they're following the Bible by taking care of those. And, but anyway, they were asking for volunteers and all, because I can't remember how many the number was that they had counted just in Summerdale that were homeless. And so the Summerdale community, and that's what they were just gonna concentrate on, the Summerdale community, of getting a facility to be able to help them.
Right.
And I thought, I wonder if we miss opportunities that way.
Well, see, that should be our main focus, Summerdale.
Yeah.
I mean, being the church, we are located here, and then from there, but believe me, you get going good in Summerdale, they're gonna come from everywhere, so you're gonna be helping, but But that should be our main focus, you
And
know.
over in-
Not main, but, you know, one of the focus.
In Lillian or Alberta, the Warner family was trying to build a tiny home village, and I saw the plans for it. This has been probably 10 years ago, but they wanted to build a village, and I think that they had started putting tiny houses on these places, but basically what they were is they wanted to put I know we're way off subject, but a tiny house, and you had a kitchen and a bedroom, and that was it. But there was a bathhouse in the center for men and for women, and there was I don't know if they were built all of it, but I think they did drop a few houses. But they had a fire pit in the center where everybody could congregate outside, and you had the trash that ran and everything like that. But they would just go buy these little tiny houses and drop them, and they had water run to it because of a sink, and they had electricity run to it. But they make these tiny houses now. I know you think I'm crazy, but you can buy them for $10,000 on Amazon. You can, like, literally, you can buy $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 tiny houses. Now, they don't all have bathrooms, but they do have a sink. They do have, you can get them with a refrigerator. And literally, they can drop one on your doorstep, and you could fold it out in just a matter. We can 3D print houses now with concrete. They drop a machine, and they do the concrete and 3D houses that can be printed in a day, anywhere you want it. So it's not whether or not it can happen. It's whether or not you can buy the land to make it happen, because there's so much regulation on those things where they say it's a community, and you can't just come out there and drop a bunch of houses, which there has to be at some point some red tape that's cut, because you have choices where either you build a tiny house village and you deal with whatever difficulties are there, or you just let them sleep in the woods, you know. And when we went to was it Huntsville, or it may have been the one in Mobile when I took somebody to, and they said, we're full. And I said, well, what are we supposed to do? And they said, we can give you a tent and tell you what overpass to go sleep under until a position's open. I was like, well, you didn't help this person. We just, yeah.
Summerdale used to be a lot more involved in feeding the community than now.
Yeah.
Prior to Ivan, the hurricane that came through and such as that. And Christians, members of the church that work in that field this has to be considered. They need to be rotated out all the time because of the abuse of what you're doing. I mean, we had people coming from Bay Minette. We had other churches that were telling their people to come here. We
still do.
Two
churches.
We were hooked up with the food bank over in Mobile. They would deliver to us every week, and we had so much stuff. And then the next thing you know, the abuse got to the point where they would come and step into the building over here, the Good Samaritan building, and I'm here to pick up my groceries.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they had their groceries there and what have you. And this was an expected thing, and many times the people that would come, they didn't want groceries, they wanted money.
Right.
And we have given out the groceries, or we had given out the groceries to the people, and they were parked on over this side of the building. And you go over there when you're leaving, and they had thrown all the groceries out in the parking lot. That isn't what they wanted.
Yeah.
But you know, once you find out there's something free, the word goes out.
Yeah, and we've had some that I try to be kind, but I will usually ask, a lot of times it's women. I'd say 90% of the time it's women. And when they come into the door, the dude's still sitting behind the driver's seat. He's sitting there at that steering wheel and says, is that your husband? Yeah. Is that your boyfriend? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why didn't he come up here? You know? He's making you do it. Yeah.
Let me tell you
Barbara.
a story. When I was working, I had stopped at Dairy Queen there on Government Street, and I had my book, and I was sitting there reading, and I'm just a magnet for people. And I had seen this couple walking down the road. Well, about that time here, they walk in. Well, she walks in. Restaurant's full. She comes to me. I guess I have a sign. And she's like, will you buy me some food? I said, yeah, I'll buy you some food. Won't give you money, but I'll buy you some food. Walk up there, I'll buy whatever you want. She said, well, my boyfriend is out there. Will you buy him something? I said, yeah, I'll buy him something. But I said, he's gonna come in here and eat it. He was sitting on the curb. So she was very nervous. I felt so sorry for her because I'm sure she was abused. So anyway, we got the food and she went out there and I could see her, you know. So I walked out there and I said, I just bought you some food. The least you can do is get up and go in there and eat it.
Yeah.
And act right.
Right.
And he looked at me because he was fussing at her and I said, get up off of that sidewalk and go in there and eat that food. And I thought, Barbara, boy, you're bold.
Yeah.
But I was like, it just made me furious
Oh,
because he had sent her in there to buy it. And then he was too sorry to come in there and eat it. And I said, get up off of that sidewalk and go in there and eat what I just bought for you.
Right, right.
He was like, okay. And he got up and went in there. And that was maybe the wrong thing to do, but it just flew all over me that he was too sorry.
Yeah.
He wanted her to bring it to him on the
Right.
sidewalk. And I was like, I ain't having to. So he got up and went in there. I
That's
said,
good.
"Sorry."
Good. James?
I got in the car and I was like, what have I just done? Couldn't you?
It makes me think, we're to love everybody. That homeless person, we're supposed to love them too.
Right.
Now, if we don't take those people in, are we not like the example that Christ used when I was in prison and you didn't come?
Yeah.
Are we gonna be harmed? Is God not going to protect us when we're doing what is right, what he wants us to do?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a big question, really.
It is, and I'll tell you that the one reason, well, a couple of reasons, but the primary reason is I experienced some of this when I was a kid, and I'll tell you that in just a second. But I do know that we have a fear, and I'm talking about the staff included. We have a fear because we've had people just walk in, you know, and you know, just as an example, our building is used by Snook almost every day. And so they'll come in and they'll unlock the doors, but they'll leave the doors unlocked. The people just come on in the building. And that's a danger for all these boys and girls playing basketball. But people will find a way into the building. And when they do, then they're all over you. Like they want this, they want that, and it's hard to get them out. So there has to be a safety part of that. But this is a hard story to tell. One of my closest friends, we moved about every 6 months for probably 8 years of my life. But one of the two cities we went to the same school 3 years in a row at some point, 6 months, you know, here and there. But one of my good friends, his name was Robert, and I still got his picture. You know how kids chase their pictures and stuff? I still got his picture in one of my books as a reminder. But Robert was probably 12 or 13, and we rode bikes together. And his family was very hard, difficult financial situation, all that. And so we had a lady at church that told him she'd pay him if he'd mow her grass. So a sweet elderly lady, just as kind as can be, and she was paying him to mow her grass, so he needed the money, his family needed the money. Well, he wasn't doing a very good job mowing the yard. And so he apparently started demanding money from her. And she would not pay, she wouldn't give him any money. And he said, "You've helped me before, why aren't you helping me?" And he killed her. He was probably 15 years old, and he called her son and said that he saw her on the floor, and the police showed up, and they asked him questions, and they said, "Did you ever go in the house?" "No, I never went in the house, just looked in the door." And they said, "Then why is there blood on your shoes?" And he took his shoes off and threw them over the fence, and he said, "What shoes?" So they arrested him. He's in prison for life as a 15-year-old kid, but his parents had taught him from his youth that there are other people that will give you things, that you go and you get it, because you stick it to the man. And his family believed, as he did, that people owed him something. So this sweet sister in Christ, who was our neighbor, who was just exceptionally kind to everyone, was trying to do a good deed to help this 15-year-old kid. Who wouldn't help a 15, 14-year-old kid, you know? And it cost her life. So from my junior high years up, and he was a friend of mine. I could never have seen Robert doing this. Like he was not like that, but his parents were demanding him to get money from people, and so it cost him his it cost her his life and cost him he's in prison for the rest of his life. And so, and I've seen a lot of things in ministry that very tragic things. I've had preachers, another one, Miss Wilma Plaster, you probably don't know who she was. She's a preacher's wife in Branson, Missouri. And she had taken in a lady from the community to help her, and she killed her. And that was my grandma's best friend. So that's when my grandma started locking her door. And so there are those stories, terrible stories, that tell us that there's got to be some kind of a balance where we're loving and we're sharing and we're giving, but we also have enough of a concern that we don't get too invested or that we don't put ourselves in a dangerous situation. It's always good to do things in groups. I encourage you ladies, again, if I have to answer for this, I'll have to answer for it. But if you're by yourself, I would not recommend doing anything like that to help somebody. But you can call someone, you can get them the help that they need. You can address it to the church. You tell the elders, here's a family. You guys probably have your pulse on a lot of individuals. We don't know who's in need. If you hear that a brother or sister or someone in your community is hurting and you don't have the financial resources to do anything, you can always mention that to the elders or to Wayne. He's the deacon of benevolence. So anyway, so that's why I'm always just a little bit cautious, because I've seen some terrible things that have happened, but at the same time, it does not mean that God's going to give us all a pass. We have to help people, and that's why God brings them to us, is to help.
I don't think the Lord expects us to do it willy-nilly, though.
Yeah.
It's like when we were connected with disaster relief during the hurricane. We were giving out food boxes galore. We was giving out brooms, mops, detergents, and mattresses. Lord have mercy, we gave out trailer loads of mattresses.
We still got some, I think, air mattresses.
But no, I'm not talking
The
about
real-
air
the real
mattress.
thing,
Yeah, the genuine article. We were giving out all these things. And the people that were coming in, it's sad to say, but some of them were some of the well-to-do people in the community.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know them, you didn't know that. And I don't know, we never did figure out how you put your finger on it unless they tell on themselves.
Yeah.
Because many times we had people come in to get food.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were giving them lots of food.
Right.
And they'd come in to get food, and we had a list of jobs that we just happened to hear about.
Yeah.
And we would share that with them.
Sure.
And this one fella came in, he says, I need some food. He says, I just moved down here from North Alabama and what have you. And he says, well, I got a job. He says, I was a helper for a bricklayer. He says, but I ain't working that hard. He said, I quit that job.
Yeah.
And I said, you're here begging for food?
Yeah.
Sometimes it changes your attitude many times about who to be benevolent with. It's
Right.
better if you don't know them.
Right. And then sometimes I have helped people and they went straight to the store and bought liquor with it. I know that because I went to the Piggly Wiggly not long after I gave him money and I saw what he was using the money for, which was a shock. But I have also had many occasions where I've helped people and realized that it helped them more than they could ever imagine. And I don't, when I do that, I'm not like these kids on social media that if they hand a burger to a homeless person, they take a picture of it. But I know that we one day, back when I was broke, I mean, I didn't have any money, and I was at Walmart, and I went in and I bought a gallon of milk and something else, just 2 items. But the lady in front of me she had fallen at home and she was bruised on all this side of her body where she had fallen, and she was trying to get Depends for her husband and get a couple other items. And I stood there and watched her struggle, running a card, and she didn't have any cash. And the cashier's like, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I can't help you with that, So I'm starting to do the math because I didn't see the number. And I'm sitting there going, do I have enough in my account to cover this lady? And I started thinking, can I put anything back? Of course, I needed the milk because I got 2 kids at home. And so I started doing the math, and I was like, I think I have enough in my account. You're checking your phone, So I went ahead and I just said, I'll buy it, and walked out. I didn't talk to. I just told her. I gave her a hug. I said, "Can I give you a hug?" She's like, "Yes." And of course, she was crying. And I hugged her and I left. And one of the ladies, one of the managers or something, chased me down. She follows me and she's like, "I just want you to know, I wish there was more people like you." And I said, "I don't know this lady. I'm probably never going to know this lady." But I said, if all of us would do our part occasionally to help people, that lady needed it. There was no question she needed the help. And so when you see people that are in that kind of situation, if it's within your ability to do it and you don't do it, the Bible says in James to know it and not do it is a sin. If you know good and you choose not to do it. But again, we have to use wisdom. We have to be cautious. But I think what would be really good is, and I've been saying this for 20 years, is if we had something in Baldwin County where we could refer people, where there was a lot of big cities do this, where you can refer to a service that they do. There's one in Foley that helps you do resumes, and there's a place that helps you find jobs, like Express Healthcare up here in Robertsdale. But we need a place where they can go, and all those services are immediately accessed. Like, here are the places where you can sleep. Here are the places that can, if we, and I know that we don't do very good cooperating with other religious groups, but if we offered a free meal on Tuesday night, every Tuesday night, just one night a week, and another church did Monday night, it's just one meal. But if we offered a meal, we don't even have to do it here. We can go out into the community where they are and provide meals. Just make soup, vegetable soup. Everybody bring. My grandpa used to call it rainbow stew and a doodly doo. You just bring whatever you got. Bring a can of green beans. Bring a can of kidney beans. Bring your can of corn or hominy or whatever you want to bring. Dump it in a big pot. Add the meat, little spice. Put it out, and we could serve meals one day a week. If 7 religious organizations did that, there would be a meal every week for somebody. And we could do it based on donations. And there are things like that we can do. But housing, again, especially in the times when it's cold, we had snow on the ground, and we had homeless people out in the snow. And I think that there has to be compassion there for that. Again, use wisdom. We're not just throwing money out like confetti. But I think that if we use our financial resources for other things, when there are people dying in the streets and hungry in the streets, then I think I'm afraid of answering to God for that.
I'm afraid we got these multi-million-dollar buildings that are used twice a week.
Yes.
We're gonna be held accountable for that.
Absolutely. That's, when Gulf Shores was building, we originally had, one of the building, we built like every 2 years, we built something. And I told the elders when I got there, I said, if you do that this way, we'll keep growing. Because if you go out there and just dump millions of dollars in a facility, it's going to look bad. And it's also going to be hard for the church family to pay for it. So we had to have like 60 or 70% of whatever we were going to build in a fund before we broke ground. But when we started building, they said, we're going to build an auditorium that can seat 1,000 people. That way when we have our 600 and 700 and 800 crowds. And I sat down with the men and I said, I'm going to ask you a question, because I know I think differently than other people, and that's fine. But I said, how many of you have family over for Thanksgiving? Everybody, we have family over for Thanksgiving. Would you build a $2 or $3 million extension for that one day for Thanksgiving Day? No, you wouldn't buy. If you're on your house, would you buy $1 million or a $2 million addition to your house for one day? No. The only time we had crowds of 600 and 700 was in the summer. That's 13 weeks. 13 weeks is 13 hours. Would you, if you were a businessman and you said, I've got 13 hours a year that we have a big crowd, would you build a $2 million, or at that time $2.5 million addition for 13 hours? I don't see how that's feasible. I wouldn't spend 365 days paying on something that I use for 13 hours. That's the way I think. I'm not going to do it. We already have too much house at our house. It's like kids are all out. Now we're sitting here going, got this big house. Maybe we need to sell this house and downsize to something smaller, because we all buy. We want to have 3 bathrooms, even though we've only got one person living in the house. Got to have 2 cars. We got 3 people. Or sometimes it's 2 cars for 2 people. But we oftentimes think about what we want, what we need, and sometimes we need to kind of pause and go, do I really need this, or can I use the money more wisely? And so we do. We spend millions of dollars a year on facilities, and we need to spend more money on the things that Jesus didn't say, you know, hey, when you get to heaven, I'm going to ask you how many pews you had, you know, how many Bibles you handed out. I'm not going to ask you those things. It's did you feed the sick? Or feed the homeless? Did you clothe people? Did you go to the hospitals? Did you go visit those that needed encouragement? Did you go to the prisons? And so we spend a lot of our time arguing and fussing over this mission and this thing and that thing, while there are people literally in our community. Again, Summerdale is, for whatever reason, we're the focal point right now for the state. The church needs to take the front, I think.
We could easily feed a good meal one day a week right out here.
Yep.
Easily.
Yep.
Yeah.
You could do it on Wednesday night. So we offer a meal from 5 to 6 on Wednesday night, and then if they want to stick around for Bible study at 6:30, how many people you think, if we're handing out a free meal every Wednesday night, would stick around for church? Now again, I'm not an elder. I'm not the deacon of benevolence. I'm just throwing an idea out here. Is that there are plenty of opportunities. We have people that were here Sunday for the first Sunday because they knew we had a meal. And we're advertising now, come on the first Sundays, we'll always have a meal. But let's pool our resources and let's get our heads together and figure out a way to help, because the Hebrew writer says you might be entertaining angels. So,
Well, if only one person comes.
Yeah.
That's one you save from.
that's right. That's right.
Pride can be a fearful thing.
Yeah.
And getting back to the lesson.
Yeah.
You know, we're commanded to love one another, but my opinion is we're naturally inclined to love. Hate has to be taught, and so does ethics, work ethics.
Yep.
Has to be taught, and we're facing a crisis now, since, in my opinion, the welfare system was created. We've created a bunch of people that just think they're entitled.
Right.
And now we've even got our generation of children and grandchildren that are feeling entitled because
Right.
they've always had it given to them by their parents.
Yeah.
And so we have a real, but all of that's learned
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah.
You're not born that way.
Right.
You learn that. So you have to unlearn it.
Right. I really wish Governor Ivey had come down here to Summerdale and seen some of this homelessness and bust them to the border. Because if we're going to help all those people crossing the border, you know, giving them free money, why don't we bus all our homeless people to the border and see if they get help? But that's just the way I think.
All these hotels.
Yeah,
empty,
yeah, they get free hotel rooms, free food, gas cards, all this stuff. I think that's come to an end now, but it would have been great if we just started busing people to the border and saying, hey, we're giving out free stuff there, go there. But the church needs to take the forefront. I mean, we should be, if this is the highest homeless population. I mean, you think about it, we got Montgomery, we've got Mobile, we've got Huntsville, some very large communities that have a lot of homelessness, but for some reason, Summerdale's growing in that area. It used to be, too, a little bit of history, Summerdale used to be the end of the railroad. And so they would end here. You got the tobacco building and some other things they did for crops and things, cotton, that they would load on those.
Railroad went through Foley.
It went all the way down to Foley. This was like for years, this was the last stop.
Oh, yeah.
And then they went on down to Foley, and then now they've, obviously the depot and everything's closed. But when they would get off here at Summerdale was known for having bars and brothels. The house I lived in was a hotel for people. The church owned it for years. The church owned it. That was the second oldest building in the entire city of Summerdale. And they would come, and the hobos would get off, or the people that were homeless would get off, and they go to the bars and drink, and they visit with the prostitutes. And I know this because David Wilson, who's our mayor, is it right, David? David, yeah.
Yeah.
He stopped at my house one day, and he told me all about this. And I said, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But we got to talking, and he was talking about how he remembered growing up that there were people just laying in the streets drunk all the time in Summerdale. So it was a place where vagabonds and homeless people congregated for a long time. And it looks like, we may be that place again. I love what St. Augustine has done and some other cities where they've went to a major place in the middle of town and built pavilions where they're large pavilions, open air pavilions, and on the corners of all the posts they have plug-ins. So if you are homeless, they're not going to build you a facility to stay in, but you can all crowd into that pavilion at night. As soon as it gets dark, they kind of congregate there, And if they have cell phones, they can plug their cell phones in. So there's no chairs or anything, but at least there'd be a place to get out of the rain. So little things like that would be a big deal. And I know that there's a lot of headache and red tape and stuff to go through, but we got to start thinking outside the box because this is not going to stop. It's going to continue.
We can't help everybody, but we could consistently be helping, and I know we help a few, but have something to where, like I say, feed a meal once a week or something like that.
Once a week.
And that'd be a start.
Yeah, even if we did it where, if your last name is A to F, you serve the meal on the first Tuesday, and then G to whatever, you feed the meal on the second Tuesday. And so we wouldn't all have to feel like we were here every week on Tuesday. If you want to volunteer every week, that'd be great. But again, you got to have somebody in charge of that organizes it. You've got to make sure that you have enough food. The hard part about doing meals too is oftentimes you feel so bad about it, but you want to give them something to go. You're like, here's a meal to go to, but if we don't have enough to feed all those that come, we might want to gauge the community. I could take you where they congregate. We could take supplies and drop them off in those areas. I think that would be good. Or a food truck, So we're over time. How did that happen? I saw a shadow. That was Natty. She's waiting to hug everybody. So we got 3 verses. Excellent. So next week we'll try to finish starting at verse 4. I do think this is a good, healthy discussion based on what's going on in our community. So take all that to prayer. And yeah, Steve. Oh yeah, project. We've got an opportunity to help the nursing home, and Steve has talked with them about it's country living, right? Country living.
It's an assisted living. It's not nursing.
Assisted living, and we've kind of taken on the role of helping with Easter baskets for all of the residents. And so I want to encourage you to think about something you could bring. 25 items of something. If you want to bring mandarin oranges, bring 25 mandarin oranges, or you want to bring some kind of an item that would help. Maybe if it's candy, it's sugar-free candy, something like that.
I might do that too.
Yep, and we could do that as a project for the church.
Anything that, socks, anything that would go inside of a Easter basket, because there's 25 residents there.
Right.
But,
How many men and how many women do you know?
Yes, I got that in my other book, sorry.
Okay. I'm gonna
There's
provide
more women than are men.
Yeah, I'm providing 25 ducks. So
Nice.
and 25 little Debbie boxes. So that'd be me.
Obviously, you don't have to bring 25 or something.
Yeah.
Just bring
But
whatever.
bring whatever
can.
you got. We'll
You
just
can give it to me, or you can bring it in here on Wednesdays, whichever you'd rather do.
You can also do 5 of each thing.
yeah, you could. And so we'll have a safe place where we can keep those baskets, and you can contribute to them. And we'll try to get that done.
But lock up the little babies.
Yeah, lock up the babies. I had to switch my. I'm down to. I've got moon pies in my office now, so we went to the moon pie store. Got me some of those blueberries. Tried the coconut, by the way.
When is Easter?
Easter's April 13th. Oh, the 20th.
April 20th.
Okay, April
All right.
20th.
Last weekend, that's why I know.
Yeah.
We'll take it a couple of weeks before too, then,
Right.
so they can pull out the, this person can't have sugar. So,
Right.
but we just want to try to help help them out, this outreach.
As an example, if you go to the dollar store, they have word search. That's something you can do. 25 little word searches, big print.
Big print, word
Yeah.
searches, big print, things such as that.
Little things like that would be great.
And there's a store up here in Foley I didn't know about. I can't remember what it's called, but they have seconds of stuff and like,
Oh.
we went there, yeah.
Checkouts.
And we went there and
Checkouts.
like, I don't know how many of y'all follow Brenda Gant, but she talks about this Amish soap all the
Uh-huh.
time. Well, they get all the rejects. They get the
Okay.
rejects from the Amish soap and it's like $1 or something
Cool.
like that. But I mean, they had stuff and it's really reasonable.
Yeah. They used to have a place in the old bowling alley, or no, it was a skating rink. They used to have this old skating rink, but it went out of business. So yeah, 25 baskets. All right, that's all we got time for. Appreciate y'all being here today.
How many packages of peeps you need?
Yeah, 25.
Yeah.